Blog Talk Radio.
You're tuned into In5D Radio, the next dimension in radio, where we bring you the hottest, in-depth, spiritual, metaphysical, esoteric conversations and news. Get ready for spirit, body, and mind to expand in 3, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1.
Greetings, and welcome to Quantum Healing with Candace. I'm your host, Candace Craw-Goldman. This program was created to assist humans in this rapidly changing world, and its foundation is based upon the late, great Dolores Cannon's work. So thank you, Dolores, for continuing to be here with us. And also thanks to Greg Prescott and Michelle Walling at N5D.com for making this show possible. With humanity's new understanding and acceptance of the quantum world and the role that consciousness plays in shaping both our individual and our collective reality, we have plenty of subject material. I'm a full-time practitioner of Dolores' hypnosis method and had the honor and extreme privilege of working with and alongside of her for several years. You can find out more about my practice at newearthjourney.com. Before we get started tonight, for those of you looking for a practitioner of Dolores' method, you may find those wonderful people at Dolores Cannon, QHHT.com. That's Dolores Cannon, QHHT.com. And also, if you'd like to participate live on the show tonight, please call in. In the U.S., the number is 646-716-8890. And, of course, there's always the chat room. Tonight is November 6th, 2015, and I'm very excited about this evening's show. A special woman will be joining us today. Nicole Radke is a holistic healer and hypnotist with a mission to treat the body, mind, and soul as one. She was born and lived in South Africa until she immigrated to the United States in 2001, entering the country immediately after 9/11. In 2011, she opened her private practice, Natural Pathways, in St. Joseph, Missouri, after transitioning out of a life in corporate banking. As often happens, life shifted again when she was diagnosed with cervical cancer. It was this experience that opened the door to understand healing on a physical and quantum level. She chose to align herself with her true purpose and developed her gift at that time as an intuitive medical medium, and she pursued then her interest in hypnosis. She became a Reiki master and studied hypnosis with Don Martin, the vice president of the National Guild of Hypnotists. And she's a QHHT practitioner and, of course, learned past life regression from Dolores Cannon, the founder of QHHT. Through her work in QHHT, she's developed her own energy healing technique that she calls quantum light transformation, or QLT. And she's been able to teach many other healers how to find out what works for them. Welcome, Nicole. Hold on.
Good evening, Candace. Welcome to our guest.
There we go. Got you. Good evening. How are you doing this evening? Is it as beautiful in Missouri as it is in Kansas today?
It is. It's a beautiful day. Enjoying the last little bits of the fall.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I am so excited for tonight.
You and I have so much to talk about. You have so many stories, and so I'm just going to kind of let you just start. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey, how you came to find yourself in holistic healing, how you came here from South Africa. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Well, like most other people, our stories are pretty long. But, the short of it, which I'll kind of start there, I was born in South Africa, lived there until I was 25, and then life just kind of changed from there. And it's not until you look back into your life where you can see where things, kind of fell into place. But I was in banking for 13 years. I was a financial analyst and loved my job, thought that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And, of course, my soul and my plan that I had before I came in decided something else. So I had to shift gears. But, essentially living in another country gives you a whole different perspective, of life. And I always try to encourage people to expand your horizons. And it seems like that's the theme of my life, is about expanding and also getting other people to do the same. But I met my husband online in 1999, back when the internet, first kind of became popular. And I immigrated here, and I've been here for about 14 years. As far as hypnosis and the other things that I do, that's really been a journey of the last 4 to 8 years for me. I started out with a lot of paranormal work, didn't realize that I had intuitive abilities and I could, do many other things, and was trying to find answers, like most other people try to find answers in their life. And just kind of kept stumbling on one thing after the other. And I met Dolores, I would say, twice that she came across my path, and in 2 completely different ways, which we'll kind of get into that. And now I've been practicing hypnosis for the last 3 years.
Nicole, tell us how your life changed from being in banking to what you're doing now. I mean, how did that happen? I'm always very curious about that because, as you and I both know, we get lots of clients in who are in more traditional areas of careers, shall we say. And I always find it fascinating when somebody such as yourself tells me that you have, a history in something like banking, and then there's hardly anything that's further away from what we do.
Well, in my case, it was a question of I had to eat my own words, because growing up, I always said I'm never going to do what my parents do. And, my mom was in banking most of her career, and I always said I'm never going to be in banking. I'm never going to do any of that. And then what do I end up doing? I spent up 13 years in there. So when I first came to the United States, I didn't really know what I was going to do. And my father-in-law at the time suggested that I apply with a local bank. Actually, it's a regional bank. And I applied. First job I ever applied for, got the job. And I was in mortgage for a year, and we lived in Kansas City. And we ended up moving about an hour north to St. Joe, and that's where I've been since then. But about a year after I started with the bank, I didn't want to commute because I had to commute an hour every day, and it was getting really tiring. And I was pregnant with my youngest daughter at the time, so I just wanted to find something closer to home. So a position opened up at a local branch, and I thought, well, I'm just going to be a teller. It is something that is part-time, and it's flexible, and I had this grand plan in my head. And, of course, when I went in for the interview, I'm interviewing for this position, and the lady that's interviewing me told me, just hang on just a minute. I have somebody that needs to talk to you. So I'm waiting there. It's really bizarre, wondering what's going on. And she brings a lady in that ended up hiring me for a financial analyst position. And that's the job that I had since then. And we became really good friends, and we're still friends. But it was just one of those situations where I was always following my gut instinct, but I didn't really know that's what I was doing. And when I was in the job, I loved it because I didn't have to work with people. I worked with numbers all day long. And I was proclaiming that to everybody. It's like, I love my job. I don't have to work with people. And, of course, that's not on my path. So I got interested in paranormal work along the way. and because I've always had experiences and wanted to explore that, and hooked up with the right groups at that time. And one thing, led to another, and I always wanted to know more. I just never felt satisfied with some of the answers that I got. And I just kept pushing until, and I didn't believe in anything intuitive at that time. I thought all of these things that we're into now is just, unbelievable. And we had one particular paranormal case that we just couldn't solve. We worked with a guy for about 9 months and just could not figure out what was going on with him. So I had the bright idea. I thought, well, if I try to find a psychic, then maybe, we can kind of kill two birds with one stone. Maybe the person can tell me what's going on in the house, and maybe it's validation for something else too, because I've always been curious. And to me, that's where everything started. The moment that I walked into her house, she looked at me and she said, well, do you know that you can communicate with people that have crossed over? And of course I said, well, yes, I do, because that's why I'm here, thinking in a very literal sense. And she says, no, that's not what I meant. I meant that you're intuitive. And that just kind of blew the doors open. I never thought that was a possibility. And it's really been a big learning experience from there. And
sounds like it's been a grand adventure. Nicole, let me ask you.
It has.
We as practitioners talk a lot about the left brain and the right brain. Sitting in your banking office working with numbers is such a left brain activity. Do you think that had anything to do with how you approached the change in your life?
I think it absolutely did. It showed me what that part of the brain does. At the same time, I understand when I have clients that come in that are very left brain oriented, I understand the perspective, where they come from, but I also can explain to them how to overcome that part, how to push that part aside. But it's also the part of me that's always been curious. So I don't see it necessarily as left brain, just that was the more curious side of me. And I like things organized. And it helped me to move me forward in life. But I think at the end of the day, for me, it was just using that one aspect of me just wasn't fulfilling. And eventually you become complacent. So I always try to tell people that, try to discover all parts of you. And that's really the mission behind what I do, is when I look at people, it's not just, what are they experiencing emotionally or physically. It's what effect does it have in your day-to-day life? It needs to be practical. I think so many people also misunderstand what left brain means. They think that you're either one or the other, and you're really just a combination of it.
Sure. So what happened with the psychic and was it like some sort of house haunting or something? Tell us about how that ended.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. So the guy that we were working with, he had activity for a long time, and we went in and we physically experienced some of the events that were going on. So you would physically be touched, which was kind of a new thing for me. And it was just very persistent. And most of the time when we go into a house or a location, we'll interview the people, try and figure out what's going on. And for the most part, the activity will die down. Well, it just didn't in this case. It really kind of brings up a deep topic about thought forms, which I would probably want to get into a little bit later in the discussion. But what he was experiencing was aspects of himself. And the lady, the psychic lady that, helped me out with that, when I was sitting there with her, she was telling me all kinds of things that nobody had known about. She told me things about my dad that had passed just about a year before that in great detail. And towards the end of it, she told me, well, you read me. And I'm looking at her like a deer in headlights. What do you mean, read me? I have no concept of what you're even talking about. And she said, well, just close your eyes and just tell me what comes to you. And I did that, and there was some definite things that, pertain to her and her life that I had no way of knowing. I never met this person before in my life. And since then, she always asked me, well, what do you want to do with this? I say, well, I don't want to do anything with this. I don't want to read people. I don't want to do anything like that. But slowly, things just started changing. I started having physical experiences myself. To me, I think that was my awakening. At one point, I literally felt for 3 days like I had ants crawling all over my body. I couldn't make it stop. And after that, it's what people call clairsentience. So, when you talk about maybe something that has happened to you, or if I'm just in your energy, I will start to sense things that are happening in your body, maybe pain that you have or discomfort or the way that a person has passed. And these things just naturally started happening. So I had to find out what was going on because it was affecting my daily life. And from there, I went into Reiki, which really opened the world to energy healing for me. And while we were in the class, there was a lady that I've become very, very good friends with, and she just happened to say, oh, I'm going to go to hypnosis school in a few months. And it immediately got my attention because I've always been interested in hypnosis. And I said, great, I'm going to. and that was it. The rest is kind of history. But, I think that we're so constantly looking for something, what am I supposed to do? What's on my path? That we miss the little things along the way. And we're not living in the same world that we lived in 10 years ago or 20 years ago. We're different. The way that I believe our body functions is different. You can call that evolution or whatever you want to call that. But I think we're changing. And we have to change the way that we think and that we perceive things to keep up with that. And a lot of it has to do with physical healing, the ability to access your higher mind and your consciousness, and for it to be a very real thing that you're always connected with. And that's the kind of things that I teach in my classes and I talk to my clients about.
And so you had your own health challenge as well. Where in the timeline did that happen, and how did that change things for you?
Well, I immigrated in 2001, and before that, I was a very quiet person. I didn't really speak much. I was much more a listener, a watcher. Didn't really use my own voice, and everybody has their own history. It wasn't the easiest growing up, but definitely not the worst. And it was around 2006. It was 3 years after my daughter was born. I was told that I have early stage cervical cancer, and I ended up having one surgery after the other. I ended up having a total of about 6 surgeries over the course of 2 years. I spent a lot of time off of work. And it just seemed like nobody had answers. They didn't know why I was continuing to have pain and trouble, and there was no reason that they couldn't find. I wasn't healing the way that I was supposed to heal. And I was just very, very tired of it. And I thought, is this going to be the rest of my life? I'm 30 years old at that point. And I woke up one day, and it was just the clearest voice that I heard, which now I believe that was my higher self. Just a very, very clear thought. You're making yourself sick. And I was kind of taken aback at this thought because it implied a lot of things. One was that I had to take responsibility for it, and that was really, really hard for me. And it took me a while. I had to really think about, what does that mean when I'm making myself sick? But also with that information came the clarity of how it happened. And it was all the unresolved emotions and things that I had, and we all have them. I just wasn't processing it in the way probably that I should have been. And my entire thought process was, kind of feeling sorry for myself. And I realized that by creating that situation, creating that illness in my body, that all of a sudden I felt loved because I was taken care of. My husband did a wonderful job of taking care of me. And, why would you want to give that up? Because suddenly you have everything that you want, even though it's in a negative way. And at that point, I said, okay, if this is really what it is, I'm really making myself sick, and it's because I want love and I want to feel appreciated. This is the only thing that I know. Show me something else. Show me how it can be different. So the reply came, okay, we'll show you. And everything that has happened after that, to me, I think that's when I shifted to my preferred path. I had to remove my limiting beliefs of thinking that love and appreciation can only come in one particular way. And I think that's what a lot of us do. We think that we can only be loved in a certain way, especially in our relationships that we have. Think of your spouse or your significant other. When they're not doing the things that you expect them to do, then you feel disappointed. Well, they have no concept of how you need to be loved if you don't communicate that. So it really taught me how to communicate better, not only with myself, but within my relationship with everybody else. All my anger went away. It was just really like a switch flipped for me.
So this was a conversation you believed you were having with your higher self. Has that continued for you then?
It has. After that, it was so different from anything that I ever experienced, and it was such in a fleeting moment. It lasted, a few minutes. And then after that, I didn't really hear that voice again until I started developing some of my more intuitive abilities, learning more about what the mind is capable of. And along the way, it definitely became louder again. And now, to me, I constantly have that conversation going back and forth in my mind. So I tell people when I try to explain what it's like to hear the higher self, I give them the example. It's like when you talk to yourself, when you have that internal conversation that nobody wants to admit that they have because you're labeled as crazy. In some of the psychological realms, it's kind of frowned upon to admit that you talk to yourself. But that's really where the information is at. And that's what Dolores was so great at, is finding all of that through her, 45 plus years. I think long before any of us realized that is really the normal way of living.
Yes, and so was it this event then that helped you become what some call an intuitive medical reader or medium? I mean, did this launch you in that direction? Do you still do this? Tell us a little bit about that.
I do. I use a little bit of everything that I do in every session. It definitely launched me towards that, but it also showed me that I was experiencing a lot of these things from a very early age. When I was growing up, I used to wake up every morning and have a horrible stomach ache, and I still have that from time to time. But I would just have a horrible stomach ache. I would ask my mom, can I just please stay at home? But by the time I got to school, it would be fine. It would subside. I was told that I'm just a very sensitive person because, I would cry at the drop of a hat. So I had this impression of who I was, but it came from other people around me. It never really came from inside of me until much later in life. And I don't think that being an intuitive or being a medium, I don't really like those words because they imply in some way, I don't think of it as a gift. I think of it as normal. So through my own past life exploration, what I've come to the conclusion is I've had other lives where things like telepathy was just how you communicated, the ability to heal. We've had all these different experiences, not just as humans, but as other beings. And it's those natural abilities that's part of my soul or my oversoul and all those experiences that I'm just tapping into. And I believe that anybody can do it. And I've taught that. I've taught intuitive development classes where somebody that would come in that think that they have no ability at all, by the end of it, you know, they're connected to themselves. They can see things in other people. They can experience things in their bodies. And I just see it as part of the evolution process. So when I'm working with somebody, let's say in a mediumship situation, I just become the facilitator, the same as I am in a regression or in an energy session. I'm just the go-between. If I am a clear channel and I'm really hearing my higher self, that's where the information's coming from. I'm just repeating it. It's me or my higher self talking to the other person's higher self, so that I have to really trust that information. And trust is so very, very important in any of this. But I think the thing that makes me unique in that way is I have the ability to almost see inside of the body. So, and distance doesn't matter, whether I'm in the same room with you or you're halfway around the world. When I close my eyes, when I see the person or I envision the person, it's almost like a movie starts playing, and I can just see areas that light up. I can see areas that are maybe a little dull, where there's maybe a lack of energy or there's an emotion or there's some kind of information lodged in that area. And it's just very clear to me where the problem is, and then also I hear what the problem is about. And it's always the root of an issue.
Can you give us
the reason,
Can you give us a story or an example to explain a little bit maybe how some of this works if you're doing this kind of reading for someone?
Yeah. So I had, for instance, I had a lady that had lost her husband a couple years prior to her coming to see me, and she was going through the grieving process and had made good progress with it, and she was in a fairly good place, but she just couldn't really move on with her life. And sitting down and talking to her, it's almost like hearing her husband right there inside my mind, talking to her, telling her about all the things that she needed to know. So a lot of people think that when you connect through a medium or when you connect to somebody that's passed, that it's about the person that's gone, that you're going to tell them everything about their life and the things that they experienced, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. What's really important is that person that still remains here. So with her husband was encouraging her to move on with her life. He explained to her why he passed in the way that he did. He died in motor.
Nicole? We've lost Nicole. Well, Nicole, if you would give us a call back, we would definitely want to finish hearing that story. So that's really interesting about the medical mediumship. I know that some people actually feel things in their own bodies, and I think that we've got her back now.
It happens to me all the time.
There you go. Yeah. It's the energy surges, perhaps.
It
right?
is. I always have that happen to me, so it's not unusual for me. But as I was saying with her, he explained to her, why he had to leave at the time that he did. That his job was done, that their path that they walked had reached the point where he couldn't go further, and now it's time for her. It's time for her to blossom. So it brings tremendous healing and closure for people. anybody can do this. There's nothing strange or odd about it, in my opinion.
Can you tell us a story about perhaps a distance case you might have done where you were able to tell somebody some information about their physical body?
Yeah. I had a lady that I was working with. I was doing energy work on her. So I always do a combination of Reiki and the QHHT that I do, which that's just seeing on the quantum level. And with her, she had a kidney transplant, and she was having ongoing health issues. And when I was working on her body, I could clearly see that the area on the the left side of the body where the kidney wasn't functioning, the original kidney, because when they do kidney transplants, they leave the old organ in there. I don't know if people knew that. But I could see, looked like a big black half-moon shape on that side of her body. And the more I was working with her, I connected with the donor that donated the kidney. And the information that came out was that his mother could not or had difficulty moving forward in life, knowing that there was a part of her son that was still alive, even though they all consented to the donation of the organ. It was just really hard for her to not be connected to something that's still living. And it was causing physical problems in my client's life. The new kidney wasn't working the way that it was supposed to. It was still connected to that previous life. It had cellular memory in there, and it took just a little negotiation. So I call it a psychic counseling session, for a lack of a better word. And just talking to him, talking to the mom intuitively, through the higher self, and saying, look, you agreed to this. If there's anything that needs to be let go of, any forgiveness that needs to happen. And a while after that, her original kidney started working again, and they actually removed the donated kidney, and she did better for a while after that.
Wow, that's pretty unusual, isn't it?
Oh. Yeah.
That's
it's
so
all
interesting.
Information.
So, if you don't mind, I'm very curious about this. A kidney that was failing so badly that it becomes this dark shape, this kind of unworking thing in the body, and it just kind of came online after all of this. That's so fascinating to me.
Yeah. When I look at the body, and with QHHT, the body reads like a map to me. So I can go to certain areas, and typically it's where the joints are, and there's very specific information that comes up in it. And the reason I found that is because every time I did a session, I would run into the same type of things in the same area. So, for instance, if you were to split the body in half, and on the left side, we know that the left has to do with the past and also past lives. The right side of the body has to do with the present and also things in your present life. If you go to the shoulder, that's typically where you carry the energy and the relationship with your mom. Anything that has to do with nurturing, how you take care of yourself. On the right side, right shoulder, that would be where the information is with your father, your analytical side, the processing side of things. So when I go through the body, there's these very specific things that I look for. But the detail is different with each person because it's the information of the specific experiences that they had growing up. So it's all
just
information.
So fascinating. Yeah, and I tell my own clients that it's the stories, the stories of your life.
Absolutely.
or of other lives that you literally put inside and keep inside of your body. And if you tuck them away and if you let them fester, especially,
Absolutely.
they can create real problems.
Yeah. And so to me, I'm constantly looking for information. And earlier you asked, how did my career in banking help me? Is to look for information. Because that's what I had to do. I had to, analyze statements and, how businesses were doing and the risk that was involved. And it was all just looking for information. So it definitely had a big part to do with that. but we make things way more difficult than it needs to be. It's really very simple.
Yes, and so you're calling this QLT, Quantum Light Transformation. How do you help others use this technique, or how do you teach that to other people?
Well, when I first started doing Reiki, I was trying to do all the different hand positions, and I was really not very good at it. I couldn't remember the hand positions, and I just didn't feel connected anyway. Mm-hmm. And I was doing a session one day, and it was in my mind, I started seeing, I'm very visual. In my mind, my client was laying on the table, and I saw, in my third eye, I saw her getting off of the table and unzipping herself just down the front, and almost like taking this suit of skin off and just hanging it on the wall on a hook. And underneath of it was this light body. It was just a brilliant white light. And that's what we worked with. And I actually started doing that before I found Dolores' method. And I just realized I was doing things differently, but I was still trying to put myself in that box of the Reiki technique. And I just one day realized, you know what? I need to just do what feels right to me and what I'm guided to do. And that's what I teach people is it's a lot of hands-on experience. We can sit there all day and go through written material and book material, and that's fine, but you have to have the hands-on experience where you can talk about what you're seeing, hearing, feeling, because the information's not for you, it's for the person that you're working on. And I think sometimes that's where some of the modalities don't lack something, but I think they can definitely be more interactive, more conversational. And it's no different than the QHHT for me. So the quantum is, for me, it has to do with the structure of your body, your DNA. I honestly believe that it affects your DNA. It's almost like I can see in between the spaces, so that's the quantum part. And the light is because we're light bodies, and it's the true nature of what we are. And transformation is because you can go through an experience, you can learn information and not be transformed. So, they don't care what we call these things. We give it labels because it makes us feel better.
Very good. I was talking to a Reiki student of my own just recently myself. It was interesting. You probably are aware of other Reiki students when they get their attunement, some of them, even if they've been paying attention in class, really kind of walk out thinking, okay, now all they have to do is walk around and touch people and they'll be completely healed and all their problems will go away. And I had to say, okay, it really doesn't quite work like that. And you really made me laugh about the hand positions thing. I can so relate to that because sometimes if I'm in the flow of whatever it is I'm in, the sort of linear left brain part of me just doesn't work at all. I don't remember where I was or what was going on because I'm in a different kind of information field that's a lot more fluid. And it reminded me of Bashar, right? And Bashar's his idea of permission slips. So I was telling this young Reiki student after he'd gone through what he did and got his attunement and everything, I said, well, Reiki's kind of just like a permission slip. And I was saying it, in a way I didn't know quite how he would take it, but I've always thought that almost everything that we do, whether it be Reiki or QHHT or your quantum light transformation, all of this are just variations of a human birthright that we have.
Absolutely.
To either heal ourselves or help others heal. This is our birthright.
Absolutely. You're so true. It's so true. I was today when I was preparing for all of this, I was going through some of my notes, and I had this thought of, just kind of pinch me because, things were just kind of falling into place. A lot of years of hard work, and it felt like I was just in Dolores' energy a lot today. I just had a lot of thoughts about her, and I could hear her say, "Why, why would I want to pinch you? You've agreed to this before you came in. You agreed to do this. There's nothing miraculous about it. You knew that this was going to happen, and it's all variations." And I think that Reiki and other healing modalities that are out there, and even Western medicine, all aspects of healing are just stepping stones, and you have to find what really works for you. And it's a tool to help you along the way. But you have to, it's really there to teach you how to trust yourself and how to trust the source of all information.
Yes, very much so, very much so. I've really felt Dolores today myself, Nicole. I had a dream last night. It was only about birds, and it was only about red birds, and it was like I was on this quest, and I was kind of like, I don't know, Indiana Jones. Instead of going after the Grail, though, I was going here and there for this amazing red bird that, about the size of, I don't know, a big penguin or something, just and glowing red bird, and this entire dream about all that. And when I woke up this morning, I'm not exactly sure how or what it means, but I know it has something to do with Dolores. I'm still kind of working that out, but it's fascinating, the information field that we can access even in the dream time, and that is one of the for me, that is one of the richest places of information. It perhaps because my own analytical mind, really is sleepy over at the side, where I can access some of these fields. But I love the fact that Dolores is speaking with you, as she is speaking with so many other practitioners and even people who never met her, never took her training, or, just recently found out about her. There's something about her energetic presence, her information field, if you would. It's like she stepped through the veil, but she didn't go far, and it's almost like she bloomed and blossomed just right past the veil, and is turned around and is sending back energy, information, and helping humanity in just kind of a larger, more cosmic way. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I just have goosebumps, as you're talking about that. So, and she was just a great. I mean, she is a great individual, and really kind of blazed the path for many of us. So, it's very big shoes to fill for each one of us that practice her technique. But she was definitely a unique individual. So I wouldn't expect anything less from her. To be everywhere at the same time.
She was a grand communicator. She always called herself, a reporter, an investigator of lost history, and I always thought of her as just an excellent communicator. And she's communicating in a very unique way from where she is not now. Well, Nicole, how did you find out then about Dolores? You said you ran into her.
Well, Well, I've always had an interest in ET and UFO phenomena ever since I was really young, but never really pursued anything particular in it except for having an interest. And somebody had mentioned her name to me, just in passing. Have you heard of Dolores Cannon? She works with people that have had ET UFO experiences. And I think I watched a YouTube video and didn't really follow up. And then 2 years later, after I had gone through my certification to become a hypnotherapist, somebody else mentioned her name to me again. And I had no idea that she worked with past lives. I never looked into it that more. So it definitely came back around. It was like a big tap on the shoulder, like, don't forget about me. And so I started, researching into her. I had additional training through Martin & Johnson, where I received my certification from. for regression, but it was focused on forensic regression, and we touched on some things of past lives, and I did past life regressions, and I always felt like something was missing. I would have a few clients that would go to strange places and experience strange energy things or just, very swirly type feelings, and I thought I was doing something wrong until I looked into Dolores the second time, and I just knew this is what I needed to do. I need to take her class. I don't know where it's going to go. I really didn't have any idea what the potential of it was. I had no idea it had anything to do with healing. I just thought, past lives were interesting. So I just kind of immersed myself in it from there. But when I first had my awakening with that, again, this voice in my head said, I was questioning, what's happening? Why am I intuitive? Why am I hearing all these things and experiencing all these things? And how do I go forward from there? And I saw this image in my mind of the Borg. I was a big Star Trek fan. And I saw the Borg, and I heard, resistance is futile. Which is, that's something that's from there. And it says, okay, I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to go with it. And so I took her training, and I just knew I needed to go further from there. And it's really changed the way that I live, the way that I look at people, the way I communicate with people. I can see that there's more than just the human being that's in front of me, that there's a story, and the story is ancient. The way that I look at time and our reality is different. I don't see things in a linear way. I think everything exists at the same time, very quantum. And it's just where your focus is at. And right now we're focused on these bodies in this physical world. And it is real. It is a reality. But Dolores really opened my eyes that there's so much more to it.
Well, why don't you share a couple of your favorite sessions, some of the things that have happened in your practice, some of the surprising ones or your memorable sessions. Would you tell us a few stories?
Yeah, well, I think they're all kind of weird and strange. Because that's what I asked for. I want the weird and strange cases. Although there's definitely some normal ones in there too, if you can consider anything that we do normal. But oh my gosh, I've had all kinds of things. I've had people experience themselves as animals, as a bird. I had one client that saw themselves as a mermaid, as a shapeshifter. I had one lady that was a rock, and I'll explain in a minute here what all those things meant. I had one person that was a water drop, and then I've had ETs, and then very normal, ordinary lives. But the one about the rock was really interesting to me because I didn't know how I felt about that. Going into it is I know that anything is possible, but until you experience something, you really can't decide how, what your perspective on it is. And, Dolores always said, just go with it. And so she was explaining that everything was very dark, and she felt very heavy. It was very physical for her as she was laying down. She couldn't move. She had a very heavy pressure on her chest, and there were lights that were above her. So I just kept on questioning her. And it turned out she was experiencing herself. She could see herself when she viewed herself from above, that she was a crystal in the ground. And there were these lights that were swirling around her, and they were connected to her higher self. They were trying to get her to learn how to let go. And she couldn't let go in that life or that existence. And it caused a lot of depression in this life here. She just felt a heaviness in her life that she couldn't get past no matter what she did. And it wasn't until she saw herself as being, if you want to say, an energy or, being this rock, this crystal that couldn't move, physically it couldn't move, that she had to decide that she wanted to leave when she thought her experience was over, instead of almost like waiting for somebody else to come do it for her. She said it made a lot of sense in her life. as to the heaviness that she felt, and literally one of her issues that she talked about was, I feel stuck. My entire life I have felt stuck, and I can't tell you where it's coming from. It wasn't anything in her history. She had a very, very normal life, nothing that should have caused that. And she just finally said, okay, now I know that I can choose to not be stuck anymore. So that was a very interesting one. Oh my gosh, I have so many.
That's really fascinating. I'm, if you don't mind, I think I'm going to jump in and tell a quick little story myself about that one. For some reason, this reminds me of a session that I had where this gal was an inanimate object too. I guess that's where I was. That's where I was thinking, as our listeners might be wondering. How can you go to have a life as well? Because everything has consciousness, and that's not to say everything has the same kind of consciousness as a higher being like a human, or a more complex being, shall we say, like a human or an animal. But even a table, everything has consciousness. And in this one session that I'm thinking of right now, that I'm recalling, this gal was, and she's quite young. She was in her late 20s when she had her session, and in one scene in her regression, she looks down and she notices that she is seeing the graduating class. Her college graduating class is happening. The commencement is happening down underneath her. And so I'm thinking, at first that she might be sort of floating consciousness viewing this event, but no, absolutely not. She was very box-like. She was stuck to the ceiling, and she couldn't move, and she was square, and she was electronic. I mean, you know what it ends up being? She ends up being a speaker, stuck to, installed to the ceiling of this graduating class. And as I know this young woman, I'm watching her as she's moving into her career, and what this is it's telling her what she's getting ready to do is she's getting ready to speak to the entire class about some of the new ideas that you and I work with all the time. And she's in a field where they don't talk about this kind of stuff at all. But that's what her session was all about. And isn't that interesting? I mean, she had
it's so fascinating.
A scene of in her own life where she just, and we're trying to figure this out, and she's a speaker. And it just, of course, it just makes so much sense to me now, and how the higher self speaks.
Yeah. And higher self is going to use things that are in your natural vocabulary, your experiences that you've had in this life, to make you understand things or how it fits together. So, as you know, many of our clients, we tell them the subconscious is going to show you a story. Whether you believe or think that you actually were that inanimate object, that's kind of up to you what you decide about that, but it's always going to make sense. It's always going to fit into something, and everything is energy. It's just at what rate do we vibrate? What's your frequency? But it's all energy at the end of the day. But that brings up, I was looking today at some of my sessions that I went through, another, what appears to be an inanimate object. I had a lady that, when we went through her regression, she kept leapfrogging. So leapfrogging is you would start out in a past life and you would progress through the life. But as we progressed, she would jump from one life to another. So she jumped into this life, and she was describing herself as, she says, I feel like I'm a recorder, like I'm recording everything. And everything looked kind of green around her. She described it as like the aurora borealis, and everything was green. But then eventually she saw that she had a body, and she was an ET. She described herself as a small gray being, and there were other beings like her. They were communicating telepathically, but her job, her only function she had, was just to record information. Well, the other beings that she called her co-workers were collecting soil samples and bacteria samples, samples out of the air, and that was their function. And she would have to watch for energy changing or energy in the air. And then if she found that, this would be reported. And she at one point she said she felt like she was a soldier, is the only words that she could find to describe the communication, the telepathic communication aspect. Like, I asked her, how do you know what you're supposed to do? Where do your orders come from? Those kind of things. And they came from other gray beings that were much taller than she was. They're about twice her length or her height. And there was this upside down pyramid that she would go into the pyramid to sleep. She didn't require any food. She didn't eat, but she would work for an hour term, so about 18 hours, just recording information, and then she would sleep, and then she would go back to recording information. And she said, "I love what I do. I like this life." The information she was collecting was in binary code, is how she said it looked like a stock exchange ticker in her mind. It was binary code. But she realized as we were moving through the life that some of the information that was gathered wasn't necessarily used in the highest good way or the best way possible, and she had the opportunity to speak up. And she didn't say anything about it. And that was what that life taught her, is that she had power. She could have changed something. She could have been effective if she had just made the choice and not just, followed what she was being told to do. She didn't know that she had a choice in that life. So the ET stuff is always very interesting to me.
So did that have relevance in her current life? I mean, I know it did, but how did it have relevance in her current life?
It had relevance for her to know that she has a voice and what she has to say is important. She's not from this country originally. She also immigrated. And the way that she approaches life is just a little different. And when you're an immigrant in the country, you assimilate in a lot of ways because, language, you have to... I have to change my accent when I first came here because people couldn't understand me and I couldn't understand them. So there's just little things that you adapt. And she just realized she didn't have to do all of that she could be herself, and that there's the repercussions for her in this life for not speaking her truth would be worse than actually speaking up for herself. So it really gave her that permission slip to voice her own opinions and stand up for herself. I'm trying to think.
You said you had a shapeshifter?
I did. This is one of the early regressions that I did. And I did this one twice because the first time that we did it, the client just wouldn't speak to me. They wouldn't say anything. It was just very, very quiet, and it was like pulling teeth. And so we ended the session, and I realized that she was editing everything that she was experiencing because in her mind it was too strange, too unusual to even be possible. So, that's the left brain, the conscious mind that gets in the way. So we did the session again, and I said, okay, whatever comes, just tell me the first thing that comes to mind. Don't judge the information. Afterwards, we'll make sense of all of it. And she experienced herself as a being that could shift shape. She was a humanoid, and on what looked like the Earth, even though it was a little different. The story always reminds me of like Alice in Wonderland. And whoever she was around, she had the ability to change who she was, what she looked like. As far as this life here, I can't remember exactly how it fit into her life here, but it was another one of those cases where you don't have to hide any part of who you are, which how many of us do that? We live behind the mask. Just be your authentic self. And also that she had the ability to adjust in any situation. And that was a big thing for her to know that, if you move from one location to
I think we might have lost Nicole again. Nicole, why don't you give us a call back? And let's see, maybe I'll tell a story while you're calling back. So I had a shapeshifter client myself. What was interesting about his session was, okay, here she is. We'll get her back.
Okay.
Are you there again?
Go ahead. Yeah, I'm listening to your story.
I was remembering, well, I didn't know how long you'd be gone, but I was remembering a shape-shifting session myself. And what was interesting about that session is only half of his body shape-shifted, like the lower half, depending on where he was and what surface he was on. So it was a very strange thing. Like from the waist up, he remained the same, and he could shape shift from the waist down. Now, how interesting is that? I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right?
I know. I mean, some of the things that I've heard is I can't judge the information. I can't pick and choose what I want. And I learned that through my intuitive work is if I'm going to start nitpicking at what's relevant and what's not, then, I'm doing myself and the client a disservice. So it's interesting. To me, I think that there are parallel worlds and other dimensions, and some of these things exist there in my reality, at least. So to me, these things are real. But it is ancient. You said something earlier about this is really ancient information. It's ancient ways of healing. I think we did all of this very naturally before, and it's coming around again, and people are waking up to that.
I believe that they are.
Yeah. I had another interesting story with a lady that saw herself as a genderless being. So she was fairly young when she came to see me, and when she came off of the cloud, she experienced herself as a green being, and she had purple toenails. It kind of sounded like something out of Shrek. And but we just go with it.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But she was a genderless being, and the way that they communicated was through emotions and through feelings, and her job was to make people happy. That's what she had to do. And the interesting story with her was that her SC just spontaneously came through. I didn't even realize at that point that that's what I was talking to. But they showed her that she was a very happy person in this genderless being that she was. And she had friends. She had creatures, like mythical creatures and animals as her friend, and they communicated with their feelings. And her purpose was to help her friends in that life with problems that they had, by showing them that there's happiness. And as her hobby in that life, she would read books. And when I asked her, well, what kind of books are you reading? What stories are you reading about? She said, well, scary things like monsters from other worlds. And it's people not knowing what to do. So, I don't know if it was something like the Akashic Records or something like that. That's up to debate. But the stories that she was interested in was people that had problems. And they were showing her where some of her desire to make people happy comes from in this life. And, she wasn't treated very well as a child, not in the home, but outside of the home in school, and that, she was bullied and things like that, and just never really felt like she fit in. So the two of the lives that I showed her were not human lives. And I said, you don't fit in here because you're not from here.
Boy, we've heard that a lot, haven't we, in our work?
Absolutely.
a lot of people are from other places like that. I have a very memorable session about a genderless being as well. Did she have any issue in her own life concerning her gender?
She did. Yes. Yeah. More in the way that I think she was a lot more open-minded than most people are. We really just box ourselves in this life.
Yeah.
So she was very aware of who she was and her sexuality, and didn't make any qualms about it, and but really had to work to get to that point. But I always find with those that come up that have experienced lives of other beings, that there's some kind of confusion in this life here, or they just don't feel like they quite fit in. There's something that they typically say, like, I feel like I'm missing home, but I don't know where home is.
Yes.
So for me, the regressions really help them to learn about who they are, these other experiences that we have.
A session I had very, very early on was this is still when I was just taking volunteers, and it was a young man. I believe he was just 19 or 20. And as soon as he got out of his car and walked towards me, I knew that he was gay. I mean, I just knew. And which is fine, but with me. But in his life, it was a problem because he was the son of a Baptist minister. I mean, it was a real problem in his life, and he was not comfortable in talking to me about that. I mean, he didn't, make the claim. He didn't state the fact that he was, but I mean, it was as plain as day that he was. But I was new, and I sure didn't challenge him on any of that. I was, practicing this work, and he came off the cloud into a forest where he was with some others just like him, and they too, all of them, were genderless. They were just, when I'm asking about, the body, and it was a semi-solid body, but it had absolutely no gender. And the look on his face, even as he was describing the fact that he just, he was like, we don't have a gender, we're all the same. Gender doesn't matter. And when he came out of the session, this idea, he was like a deer in headlights. The idea that there was an existence for any kind of being out there that wasn't tortured about what gender they were, what other people thought, what gender that they, what role they should have and how it should be expressed. It was such a novel concept to him, and I know it changed his life because he was so pressured. He was so miserable about his relationship with his father who just was worried about his son's immortal soul, and his son can only be who he can be, and there's this awful thing, and he got to take this story home with him about a part of his experience, a part of himself having this incredible freedom, having that giant boulder just removed from his life for just a little while, but he got to feel what that felt like, and he could hold on to it. Yeah.
And that's a lot of times what they'll say, and that's something that came out of this session too, is that they're not used to living in a gendered body. And if you think about the human existence, we're so defined by whether we're male or female. It touches every aspect of your life. And in her case, they told her that, she volunteered to come here to help people on this planet with those issues because she's experienced something else, and that her reason for coming here is very specific, and that the world needed her. And she's touched a lot of people. Her watching her life unfold has been pretty amazing because I do get to keep in touch with some of my clients, and it really unconfused her life for her in many, many different ways.
So I know you have a special interest in what's happening with us as humans, and especially about what's happening to our children. What are you seeing in your work about that?
I talk to so many different people, and the one thing that keeps coming up is it seems to be between the ages of about 12 and younger, and especially between the ages of 9 and 12 seems to when they experience a lot of things. They're just saying that their children are seeing more things, maybe things like spirits or energy. They're waking up, scared at night, the things that we experienced as children. But it's affecting their daily lives. And when I look, my youngest is 12, and she went through all of this. And when I look at how we're educating and parenting our children, it's really outdated. We're doing the same things that our parents did and what we did 100 and 150 years ago. We're not the same. We're a lot more conscious. We're aware of other parts of the world. We have media and all these things. We're just so much more connected. And there's this awakening that people are experiencing. They're just seeing more synchronicity in their life. So I really think that the children that are being born now, in this last decade, that the way that they perceive the world is different. And to help people understand that is, if you can imagine for a moment that the information that we get, flows into the crown. We're always talking about crown chakras and imagine opening up your crown. It's almost as if they're more directly connected. And they assimilate information so much faster. They learn faster. They pick things up faster, so they get bored. And I don't think we're stimulating them in the way that they need to be. And if we don't change that, then we're going to have a generation that have some pretty big problems. I think it's part of being connected to that subconscious self, to that internal conversation, to that guidance that we have. We don't have to go through all the channels and all the different methods, meditations and all these things to get into that altered state of communicating. It's already there. It's on. And I think if parents and educators realize that the way that these kids are perceiving information is much more energetic, much more different, then they'll be more productive. I think that the technology that we'll be able to discover in the future will just be, amazing. I kind of see that going down that path in, 200-300 years from now, these are the things that's going to lead to everybody being able to communicate telepathically, being more in touch with all of your senses. It's almost like in the DNA, extra things have been activated, extra senses have been activated. That's kind of how I see it. Does that make sense?
Oh, it absolutely does. And I don't know about you, but even when I was a kid, the idea of kind of sitting in the classroom, and having somebody stand in front of you droning on. I mean, even when I was a kid, I would look around at the other students in the classroom, particularly in early, primary kind of education, knowing that there were so many different rates of acceptance or understanding of what was going on, and it always seemed to be, just inefficient to me, the whole idea. And I think that concept of, a group standing in front and waiting for, somebody outside of themselves to impart information in that kind of way. Not saying that is something that can't ever be valuable. Of course it is valuable.
Absolutely.
We share stories, we share information, everything, but sort of the rote kind of, you mentioned it before, the repetition. Well, we did it this way, so we're going to do it this way, and we've always done it this way, and just keep it's just not working anymore. Not for a lot of kids, not a lot of these kids who have some of the the learning quote unquote disabilities that we're diagnosing them with, and we're finding out something different in sessions, aren't we?
Absolutely. One of the most amazing things to me is I have a couple friends that have autistic children, and I've worked with a few others, and we're so quick to label people with problems or an illness or a disease, like ADHD and all these things. But to me, especially with autistic kids, it's almost like they just get a straight download of information. And where you and I have this filter in between where it slows the information down and we can process it in our physical reality. It's almost as if that part is not there for them. So imagine if you could plug yourself into 220 volts. What's going to happen? You're going to kind of short circuit. But I don't see anything wrong with them. To me, it's like, oh my gosh, that's our future. That's how we're going to be. We're going to be so connected, and everything's going to happen so fast. And especially with autistic kids, they'll tell you the truth, and they don't beat around the bush. They'll tell you if they like you or if they don't. It's just information. They just have access to information that we have to work hard to get to sometimes. Mm-hmm. And the other thing with a kid is the energy that they have. The frequency is much higher, and they don't require sleep as they used to. So kids are running around all times of night. They're having 4 or 5 hours sleep, and then they're up again. And always diet, stuff like that can influence that. But there's definitely a trend that we're noticing with kids.
We've got a 2-year-old grandson who's like that, who regularly is going to bed at 10, 11, and midnight and waking up at 7 in the morning and waking up through the night. And it's very, very much who he is. And talk about energy, that this idea of sitting still. This grandchild of ours, he just is not going to sit still. And I don't know if he's going to end up being one of the ones who may have this quote-unquote diagnosis, but, his mother, our daughter, already has this pegged. She's going to be doing the homeschooling, and she's not going to take him down that road of being diagnosed and medicated and labeled and all that stuff. But because he's intense, and he's intense, and he's exceptional in his own ways, and it's fascinating to watch this. And I mean, one of the last clients I had of last week was a man who came to see me who he had 3 children, and 2 boys and a girl. And the girl he called his angel, and she was really sweet, and she was very mature emotionally. She was able to handle situations far beyond her years, as far as young children kind of interaction things going on. But it was the 2 boys who were really, really fascinating. They both carried memories of their past lives into this life. One, this young boy, and he's just 4. He is telling anybody who will listen that he's from the inner earth, that this is where he's from, and this is where his people are from, and he makes comparisons all day long to anyone who will listen about the difference between life in inner earth and life on the outside of the earth now, and just it goes on and on
and
on.
How would he know those things?
Right?
It's like how would a 4-year-old make all these? Of course their imaginations are really intense, but if you really think about it, why that story? You brought up something really interesting about them remembering. And that is a big part of it. I remember my daughter, my youngest, telling me from when she was little, from when she could first speak, and she still does to the day. She remembers the day that she was born. She remembers her birth. And I kept telling her, there's no way you can remember it. Nobody remembers that. And she would tell me things that had happened. In the delivery room. She was kind of bored with hand first. And she remembers that. She has been telling me things about it. And I think that they're coming into this world, into this life, a lot more aware. And one of the problems that we have, when we're born into this life, we forget. We forget why we are here, what our agreements were, what experiences we desired to experience for our growth, for our learning. But they're coming here and they're remembering more of it. So they're definitely our future.
Something I've noticed, and it's just in a wonky place like Facebook, but I am noticing it. Have you been noticing this where people will pass around YouTube or Vimeo video clips of young children who have a phenomenal talent of either singing or dancing or playing a musical instrument or something like that, where the skill and the soul and the the maturity is far beyond anything that you could imagine from these tiny little children. Bringing these skills from other lifetimes. But what's exciting to me about that is this idea, even though the young children are doing this more naturally, in QHHT sessions, you can ask to be reconnected with skills that you've had in other lifetimes. And I know that you've had sessions like that, haven't you? I know I have, where, for instance, people are like healers or et cetera, and they can then, once they've been introduced to these other lives where they've had these other skills, they've reconnected to that, and they can bring some of the skill and knowledge from another time, another life, another place into today's world.
I know that's absolutely the truth, and to me, and that's how I see it. I think some of us agreed or decided to have access to those abilities from a very early age on to help other people uncover some of these experiences that we have. But, I kind of think of it as like a pool of water. I don't really like using the term even past lives. A lot of times I just refer to it as other lives or other experiences, because if I look at a pool of water, it's not linear. It's just wherever I focus on. And everything that I've ever experienced is there for me to tap into. Now, I don't want to do all of it at the same time, because that would be too overwhelming, like remembering everything. But I do think we have had other experiences, and that's what we in this life regard as gifts or talents. It's things that you've done before. And,
it's so funny you're saying that. It's funny you're saying that about other lives. This is kind of off the subject, but you and I belong to the same community, the original Dolores Cannon QHHT support forum. And in a message that you sent today, you called yourself the other Nicole. And you know what? When I read that, I read it just like you just described about the other life, like that was an aspect. But you were actually talking like to another person named Nicole, and I didn't even go there first. I thought you were like signing off as one of your aspects.
but think about, if we start talking about parallel lives, I had a meditation experience about a week ago, and I've been doing this exercise where I try quantum jumping, and what that is, it's where you try to envision different versions of yourself that have already accomplished things that you're trying to do. So I've been trying to write for a little while now. So higher self just started showing me in my meditation all these different parallel lives, if you want to call them that, where I had different careers, different families, different personalities. And when you talk about all of us being connected, you're a part of me. I'm a part of you, at least in my reality. Everything is connected in that way. And if we start seeing, I want to say through the veil, we can start seeing why we have different experiences and how they're supposed to help you. And part of what came out of that is so many people feel alone these days, or experience depression, but just essentially just feeling alone. And they said we're all one. But when you look at the word all one, what do you see? It says alone. And it's just your perception.
A-L. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just your perception of being alone. It's really everything is one. And when it finally hits home to you, then it's almost like you can trace or track the connections between situations.
Yes.
But we like to label stuff.
I just saw a communication between a couple of people about that reminds me of what you're just talking about there. The one gal said hello to somebody, and he said to her, do you really have knowledge of God? Do you really know God? Can you really talk to God? And she, a very happy and connected and awake person, said, absolutely, you're right here, aren't you? And
yeah. And
he, and of course, for him, he missed the joke completely. It wasn't anything that was apparent to him quite yet. But this delightful woman, is making that observation and that statement by saying that, God is in you and in me, and I'm in you and you're in me, and that kind of goes over a lot of people's heads. But once you can I think it does accept that.
Yeah. No, I think it does. I think each person is on a different journey, and you are in a different place. You've had different experiences, and that's why it's important, not to judge, because you don't know what that person is here for. But we try to label things, and we like things to make sense. That's part of the physical reality that we have. It's very slow. It's very not a low vibration, but definitely a lower vibration than some of the other experiences out there. And you have to, some of these things you have to really think of very literally. Same as the body. The body is very literal. Just break it down to the most basic concept, and that's where the truth is. We overthink it, we overanalyze it, we try to make it fit in all these places, where if you just step back and say, on the most basic level, what does that mean? And if God or source is in me, that means that anything is possible. And if I believe that anything is possible, then anything really can happen. But the timing of it is a little different. We experience time here for our benefit, but all lives, everything is happening at the same time. There is no time outside of this. Time to me is just a slowing down of the frequency to be able to process the information. And our job when we do sessions, to me, that is time traveling. That's the real deal.
Yes. And I really like the way you were speaking about how simple it really can be. And when when I speak to people about Dolores Cannon and her method of QHHT, it was so brilliantly and amazingly, beautifully, simply elegant. You know,
Yes.
There weren't a lot of what Dolores would call bells and whistles. Just not a lot of bells and whistles at all. You didn't need them. You know, you just don't need them. You get right to the point. And actually, I'd like to talk a little bit about the body a little bit more. About I know that you have a interest in the natural ability of the body to heal, and we see that happening sometimes right before our very eyes in sessions.
Yeah.
And sometimes in a very fast way, and other times it's just the beginning of a process that happens later. What would you like to tell us about that?
Well, I think, first of all, when people think about healing or miraculous healing, sometimes it's a hard concept to get behind. But again, if you break it down to simplest terms, if I cut my finger and I don't do anything about it, what's going to happen? It's going to heal. The cells are going to regenerate. That's the way that your body works. It just naturally works that way. Whether you then use medicine to help you or alternative methods, all those things are just tools for you to use, but you're the one that is healing yourself at the end of the day. So if my body that's the way that its natural state is to constantly regenerate itself and to heal itself, why can I believe that my cut finger can heal, but I can't believe that I can be healed from cancer or from another serious disease? If it is appropriate for me, if that,
Oh boy, I think we might have lost you again. Nicole needs to call back again. Nicole and I have been saying the same thing to clients. You don't need to go to a doctor when you cut your finger. So, how is it that we have created a society and a life where we feel like if it's something that's a little bigger than a cut finger that we have to go to the doctor for everything? How is it that we've come to that? And I think it's because of what we talked about before, where it's something that's repeated, and it's repeated generation after generation after generation. And when I was a little kid, I know I used to ask about the idea of a lizard, and a lizard can lose its tail, right? And it can grow back another tail. And I remember being absolutely amazed by that. And asking, I don't remember, my parents or my teacher, well, if a lizard can grow back the tail, if I were to lose my arm, could I grow back an arm? And, of course, whoever it was answering the question would say, well, no, you can't do that. And I used to think, well, why not? I mean, really, why the heck not? If a lizard can grow back a tail, why can't a human grow back an arm? And even other things like, crocodiles or sharks, they can grow rows and rows of teeth. So why can't people do that? Obviously, biology is equipped to do that. And Nicole is having trouble dialing back in. I really am not sure what to tell you, Nicole. It says it won't let you back in. Well, Nicole, what am I going to do without you? Let's see. Let's see if there's something else that I can do. I might be able to send you an invite this way so that you could direct connect, Nicole. Let's see if we can do this. I'm going to send you a email to NPHYPNOSIS. That's nphypnosis@yahoo.com. And that's how you can also get a hold of Nicole. But I'm sending her a direct connect invitation, so hopefully that she can come and join us online through the computer. So forgive us this little bit, this little bit of technical problems here. But we're going to see if we can't get Nicole to come online in that way. So let's see. We were going to talk about so many other things, healing and the body. You know, in QHHT sessions, sometimes truly amazing things can happen right in front of our eyes. I've actually seen the light show up and move across the body in kind of like a searchlight pattern, visible light. And it doesn't always happen that way, but sometimes. Okay, I think maybe she's here. Is she here now? I think Nicole is here.
I just couldn't call back in.
I don't know what's going on.
It must be important information. I kept trying to call back, and it just would not go through.
Well, I'm trying to multitask here. I'm not all that great with that. But I was talking a little bit about watching healings happening in sessions, and I wonder if you've actually, especially with your intuitive and your psychic and your mediumship abilities, have you actually seen some of the energy come through the room? I know that I have. I mean, sometimes I've actually seen the light. I mean, seen glows on the body or orbs or other things move through, undulations in the body. Do you have any stories about that you'd like to tell us?
I do. You know, usually when I experience those things, it's much more internally for me. I don't see it outwardly, except when I'm doing a QHHT session. Sometimes it will look like there's lights glowing or sparkles or flashes of light in the room. Mm-hmm. It's definitely an interesting experience, you know, watching it. And it's usually when it happens during the healing portion of the session, when the subconscious is going through the body and healing, you know, aspects of the physical body. But we were talking about just healing in general. And you really, if you think about healing, you have to all levels of healing if you understand the information and the purpose of it. And, you know, then the body has to quit sending the messages. It's just messages. It's just information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what has been
I've seen all kinds of stuff for that.
What's your best advice for people to allow the natural ability of the body to begin the healing process? What are some of the things that you tell people about that?
I think that the simplest method is to just put the intent out there, even if you have to have a little conversation with yourself when anything is really happening to you, and just say to your higher self or ask your higher self, let me understand what's happening, give me the information, let me integrate it, and let me make whatever changes I need to make. And all you have to do is pay attention to your thoughts, to that internal conversation that you have. We're so quick to dismiss it. Like, it's just my imagination. I'm making it all up. You're missing out. You're missing out on a big part of your life that way. If you ask, you will get the information. It might not always make sense to you right away, but if you keep thinking about it or go back to it, review it, something's going to click for you, and it's going to fall into place. You know, we talk about things like colds, feeling under the weather. What usually happens when you have a cold? You have to go lay down. You have to rest. Well, maybe your body's telling you that you need to take time for yourself. Maybe you're just so busy working all the time that you're neglecting yourself. So what better way to get you to go and lay down and rest than giving you a cold, or you yourself giving you a cold? So, just always look at what's going on in your life at that time. Look at your relationships, the things that you're struggling with, and the clues are there. You just have to, connect some of the dots together. And I always say that there's a parallel or a similarity between your home life, or your personal life, and work and career. The same patterns, the same cycles, but sometimes it's opposite ends of the spectrum. And many things are rooted in our past. Psychology, when you're talking to a counselor or to a therapist, they're always asking you about your childhood. Tell me what happened in your childhood. Because that really is where we start forming some of the habits and the patterns and the cycles that we have. And then you just get to experience them from different perspectives. So think about your relationship with your mother and your father, and with your significant other and your spouse. There's usually similarities in there because it's all for your experience. But, if you can't find the answer in this life here, that's your clue that it's probably in another life.
Yes, absolutely. And with QHHT, I know every once in a while I might have a client either show up or wonder why a session, takes so long, because we really do want to know about things like, well, tell us about your childhood, because it's usually very, very important, and exactly for the reasons that you've just mentioned. And
that's such an important part of the session. And if we have other practitioners listening to this, or if somebody's considering having a session, that interview part is so very, very important, because you have to be open and honest. And how many people really get to tell their story? Not very many. Think about people that you might work with. Whether you're working at in a corporate situation, or you're working in the restaurant industry, always about relationships and people, no matter what you do and where you are. That's why we're here, is to learn about those things.
To try to make kind of a real distinction between what we do and the idea of the Western medicine doctor, which, believe me, I was at the dentist today. I haven't given up Western medicine at all. I definitely have doctor's appointments myself, but what our doctor's appointments have ended up being, in the Western medical model, have been these like 10-minute drive-through things, where we tell symptoms and the doctor gets out their pad and either orders a test or orders a chemical for you to take. And this whole idea of health from the perspective of QHHT is, what's the story? What's the story? And if you can find out the story, then you may not need the knives or the tests or the drugs, and you can't find out the story in 10 minutes.
And that's what I tell my clients too. When I talk about body, mind, and spirit, I think that all the methods out there are valid. You have to take care of the physical body. That's your health, the things that you eat. Are you putting good information in it, or are you putting bad information? And that right there is the biggest thing with weight loss. It's helped me to lose 40 pounds. But just evaluate, are you putting in good information or bad information? And that's the physical part of it. The mind part is where hypnosis comes in. It's our thought patterns, our perception. And then the soul part of it, or the spirit part, is the part that's outside of you, the master plan, if you want to call it that. And to be a healthy individual, you need to pay attention to every area of that. And so many times when we just look at, for instance, going to the doctor, that's treating the symptoms, and that's fine. But you're going to keep treating the symptoms until you resolve the root of it, until you find out why it started in the first place. So it seems like I have a trend with a lot of people that end up coming to me, have gone through some type of cancer, and it's invaluable to them to find that information about, well, why did this begin to start with? Where did, with us, when we talk about cancer in our realm of work, we know that cancer comes from anger. There's some anger somewhere in the life that's unresolved, whether it's this life or in another life. So how can you ever expect all of it to go away if you don't ever deal with the emotion part that went into it, or the feelings? So to me, every part of it is relevant. I would never say, one replaces the other. It's all tools for you.
Yes. And some of those things, don't you wonder, I know that I do. So some people who say recover from cancer, never exploring any of what we've talked about here directly. They may not have this kind of therapy or consciousness exploration or anything like that, but maybe they go through their chemo treatments or their whatever, and there's something that happens to them sort of along the side, things that they that changes about themselves because they have to change jobs or they have to change family situations or something like that. And in their life changes. They become a different person. And then they may absolutely survive the cancer, and they may come out of it saying, well, the chemotherapy cured me. And you and I both know that we have clients who, even in the SC portion, the higher self portion of the sessions, will tell you things like, that chemotherapy had nothing to do with it.
Yes.
It had to do with whatever. You quit in the job or whatever it was,
Yes. Typically when somebody's diagnosed with something terminal or a serious illness like that, the first thing that happens is they stop and they reevaluate their entire life. So they're doing the work regardless. Higher self will always find a way to get the information to them. I had one case where an individual was diagnosed with cancer, was going through chemotherapy, and in some of the sessions, not through hypnosis, but through the QLT, the body, and that's the thing with the QLT too, the body speaks. The body was telling the person, well, I'll make an agreement with you. If you stop doing X, Y, Z, if you stop treating yourself in this way, then I'll make the tumor go away. And they had to then decide, am I going to do this for my best interest? And I can only speak from my own experience too. When I was going through all my surgeries and the treatment and that, I could never understand. I was never really upset about it. When you think about, I don't know, maybe this is just my perspective. Somewhere inside of me, I expected to be really upset about it. Like I didn't think in terms of, oh my gosh, I'm going to die from this. I just really didn't have a great emotional reaction to it. It was just, okay, well, we'll deal with it and life carries on. And I thought that there was something wrong with me that I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel sorry for myself. And this is no offense to anybody going through it. This is just my personal experience. But I thought that there should have been a sadness with it or heaviness with it. And I never experienced that. And it wasn't until afterwards that I realized, well, it's okay. I didn't have to feel that way because at my core, I didn't believe that it's something that I had to fight. It's just something that I needed to understand. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes just so much sense. I mean, you see it everywhere. You see it everywhere when people talk about their battle against this disease, their battle against that, the fight against cancer. It's just that the fighting and the battle. That's one of the biggest problems that there is. You need to look at it square on. You need to understand why it exists. You have to actually accept it. From the place of acceptance, from the place, which is, sounds like where you were, rather than like screaming and running from it, because how are you going to do that anyway from something inside of your body? But it's what humans are wont to do. But and it's never from easy. That point. Right. From that point of acceptance is where you have the opportunity for change, not while you're railing against it.
Yeah. I think it's what you focused on. If you're focused on that this is going to be difficult, it's a fight, I have to battle it, then you're just creating more of the energy that you don't want. Why not see yourself as healthy, feel yourself as healthy, and give your body something to work towards? And this is a lot what we do with traditional hypnotherapy is, can you envision the new you? Everything in perfect order. And it seems like it's kind of a utopia, but why would I not want that? And I just think it's where you choose to focus on. And it doesn't mean that if you go through all of that, some people recover from terminal illnesses, other people don't. It depends on what your plan was before you came into this life. Is it along your preferred path? Maybe by you going, or maybe by that person going through that experience and maybe not turning out the way that we would like, maybe talk to people around them about empathy, about compassion, about what it's like to deal with something difficult. So there's always something to learn from every situation. And I tell people, if you ask, how is this helping me, it's going to help you to shift that perspective.
You teach some weekly meditation classes. Can you tell us a little bit about those? And how do those help keep you healthy?
It's my favorite part of the week. We started out doing meditation classes, and it's not your typical transcendental meditation. It's just really guided visualization. It helps people to first of all trust the imagination, which is the radio or the link, the bridge between the higher mind and the physical mind. And to me, it teaches people to be more intuitive and to how to access information. So we do all kinds of different things. Sometimes we experience ourselves in different places. Can you imagine yourself walking through a hallway and then through a door? And what do you find on the other side? It's awakening the part of them that they used as children, and then we put it away because we had to function in the adult world. And it's just really reconnecting with that creative part of yourself. And it helps people to manage stress and to just deal with everyday problems in their lives and to find the insight that they're looking for. And it's never me doing anything. It's here's a method that I have found that worked for me and other people. Try it if you want. Adapt it to whatever you want it to be. And it connects you to a higher self.
And
so they're really
that's
fun.
That's so much of what we're hearing all throughout our sessions and some of the other work about that connection really being important for moving, into a more expanded, more balanced, and just a more creative kind of life, that connection with your higher self, not walking through life, kind of as a drone without really thinking and paying attention to the moment and what's going on.
And that's all it is. It's being perceptive, being into meditation and into the things that we're interested in. It doesn't mean that you're living in a fantasy world. We're living in a very real world with real life problems, but it teaches you methods how to deal with it. And I think a lot of people think that meditation is related to maybe Buddhism or religion in some way, and it's really not. It's just guided visualization. And it's really easy to do. So many people say, I don't know how to meditate. I can't do it. Take 30 seconds where you're in the bathroom, close your eyes and let your mind drift and just explore your imagination. That's all you have to do. And then pretty soon you'll be doing half an hour or an hour. So it's really very easy. But,
well,
the dream world is very
girlfriend.
interesting too.
I know a lot of people struggle with the idea of meditation, but there's a lot of different ways, and I like the idea that you have different classes about the different ways. I mean, there's the walking meditation, there's the minute meditation. There's, you just have to just pay attention a little bit. And sometimes it's as simple as just listening to your breathing. If you just concentrate on your breathing just for even, a minute. that is an excellent start.
Yeah, because what it does, when you do start slowing down and you even just take 3 or 4 deep breaths, it gets you out of that fight and flight, part of the body, of the nervous system that we live in so often, and it gets you into that creative problem-solving side. So automatically you're going to feel better, you're going to feel more relaxed, and you'll start to see solutions to your problems, because it's like trying to remember where your keys are, or having something on the tip of your tongue and you just can't remember. Take a few breaths and the information is going to come.
Yep. It's all about the breath.
Yes.
We're coming down to talking for a couple of hours now, so it's probably coming close to wrapping up the show, but I did want to touch just very briefly on once again about dreams and about the way that the higher self talks to us through our dreams, because I think we could do a whole show on dreams and dream interpretation, couldn't we, Nicole?
Oh my gosh, I can talk for days on it. Dreams are very interesting because it's not only the psychological aspect of working out, things that you've experienced during that day or during that week. There's also other things that happen. A lot of people that have ET experiences or UFO experiences are during the time that they're sleeping, astral projecting. For me, that is almost the real life there. And I bring some of those experiences back here. And I feel it's really important to look at dream interpretation. And a lot of the dream interpretation resources that are out there doesn't take into account that we are more conscious beings now in the time period that we're in. Always trust your intuition when it comes to dream interpretation. And the things that people think are scary are not scary at all. It's, again, take it down to the most basic level. What does this mean, in the most basic terms, and then start rebuilding the picture or the image of it. But I think we have very real, very energetic experiences while we dream. It's my favorite part of every day. I love going to sleep.
You and I both. I think we'd have so much to talk about there, and I love the similarities between dream time and QHHT sessions, because that's what the higher self's doing in a QHHT session, is giving you kind of dream imagery, symbolic imagery, and sometimes it's about absolute past lives, literal past lives, and then or future lives or whatever. And sometimes it's very symbolic, very much like a dream. And so that's why it's important, if you are thinking about having a session or you're coming up on one, to take some time to possibly record your dreams, intend to remember your dreams, or practice daydreaming, because this is getting kind of that muscle going for a session if you're going to have one yourself in the future.
Yeah. I always used to say, if I could just plug my mind straight into the television, it would be like the best sci-fi show ever. And I think a lot of people that might be a little more disconnected or a little more grounded in the physical reality in the daytime experience more vivid dreams, because that's when you're available. And that if you find the balance in your life, then you'll experience more of an even experience that you have during the daytime and at night. But it's the natural language of the mind is through symbols and images and pictures. Language is for us to communicate to other people, but your own communication is through that symbology.
I think, that's an excellent way of putting it. Well, I think that it's time to tell our listeners how they can find you in the future, and if you could wrap up and tell them again the kind of services that you offer and how they can get in touch with you, your websites, etc. And
absolutely. Well, I'm in St. Joseph, Missouri, which is northwest corner of Missouri, and I have clients traveling from all over, but you can reach me on my website. It's www.naturalpathways.co, and I'm also on Facebook. I offer hypnosis sessions, regression. I do energy sessions. I do personal coaching and mediumship. A lot of my sessions, except for the hypnosis, I can do, on the phone or Skype. That doesn't require you to be there, but hypnosis, I do one-on-one with clients. And they can also reach me through my email, nphypnosis@yahoo.com.
Yep, which I spelled out for everybody earlier. I was trying to send you another link to the show in case we were having some really bad phone problems. I appreciate you putting up with our technical difficulties there, Nicole, and I so appreciate you coming on the show and telling us a little bit about your life and your world and your work. It's been really great fun, and I really do want to have a dream show with you. Would you come back for one of those?
Absolutely. I enjoyed this so much, and I can talk for days.
Okay. All right. Well, then,
thank you very much.
It's a date. We're going to have Nicole Radke back, and we'll have maybe listeners call in or type in, or maybe we'll take...
That would be great.
We'll take dream synopsis via email even before the show. We'll do some dream interpreting next time we get together.
Yeah,
so
that would be amazing to get some interaction.
Yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
That'd be fun. All right, so I'd like to remind those of you who are looking for a practitioner of Dolores' method and you're not near Nicole, you can find practitioners all around the world at DoloresCannonQHHT.com. And you can find out more about me and my practice here in Kansas, near the town of Wichita, at NewEarthJourney.com. So please join us again next Friday. We'll have another amazing show lined up for you. And I want to thank all of you here and in the chat room and everywhere else, and all of you people who have shared the Blog Talk shows around social media and the archived YouTube shows after the fact. Thank you so very much, and good night, and see you next time.